Welcome to the Cauldron of Curiosities. Today we're going to talk about a few things that I'm curious about. You might wonder what some of the noises are in the background, and the ever-present bumblebee has got his broomstick from the Harry Potter series that he does like to chew and throw around the room. And we're in a room at the moment, we're not in a van, so that accounts for the slightly different acoustics that we're experiencing. Now, you may notice that the podcast is running in two different styles because I invited a number of different people to come onto the podcast. Some of them have actually not even replied to my request or my invitation. And, you get the picture comes up next to the message saying they've read it. Although I did hear that you need to tell somebody or pass something past someone at least 8 times before they might respond. But some people respond on the first attempt. Well, I invited quite a few different people, an eclectic mix of individuals that I thought would be able to share some of the things that they're curious about. And this set me to ponder why people didn't reply, why people didn't respond to messages, and what could be done to get a significant response or an answer, or at least a no. I'm not expecting everyone that I invite to come on to the podcast and talk to me, because there's a variety of reasons why people might not want to come on to the podcast. But what would be helpful is, if they don't want to come on, could they just say, "Sorry, Sarah, I'm busy," or "No, I don't want to"? And that is another curiosity, isn't it? Why do people find it so difficult to say no? Why is it easier to come across as ignoring someone than actually saying no? Let's go and have a look at that. So, why do people not like saying no? The Centre for Emotional Education, Jean Bond, says that people can't say no when they're afraid of the judgment of others, when they think they have to earn love, acceptance, and respect from others by putting them first, or when they have a deep-seated need to seek approval from others. In other words, when they do not value themselves enough and their self-worth is tied to what they think others think of them. There is a more complex reason, she says. This is due to childhood experiences of being conditioned into conforming. People who don't like saying no have experiences in society that have constrained their choices about how they live and express themselves. They feel they have limited options in saying no. And it may be they were never taught by their family or community how to say no in various contexts. And they don't know how to deal with the associated guilt or doubt or fear that can also come with saying no. Together, she says, these issues distort people's sense of worth, their sense of self-worth, and it robs them of their own ability to express who they truly are. So does that make you think about why you might not say no? I had to think about when I don't say no because I want to be helpful. Why did I sign myself up to do a certain job or help with a task? Because I wanted to be helpful. I know there's a part of me that feels guilty if I don't help others, if I don't do that thing like picking up litter, if I see plastic lying around. There's a part of me that pokes me and says, you better pick that up and put it in the bin. Whose voice is that that's coming through? Is it my voice? Or is it the voice of the community that I grew up with? Another part is that we are formed by society, by the people that raised us, and that may have been our parents, our grandparents, or other caregivers, and that will have had a huge impact on us. And no matter how hard they think they tried, and while some caregivers will have been better than others, they may not have got it right all the time. But instilling a sense that we should not say no is actually one of the most common issues that parents pass down to their children, or should I say caregivers pass down to the younger generation. Part of this is because parents want their children to be well behaved. Conforming is good behaviour. Conformity is achieved by trying to get a child to do what we want. Saying no to expectations, requests, or demands is not something we want our children to do. So when a child wants to walk off to the left and go and pick some blackberries, and we want them to get into the car, we want them to do as they're told. And we probably say to that child that has its own mind that says, no, I'm eating the blackberries, that they're badly behaved because they're putting themselves first. We disregard the fact that the child might actually be hungry or may love the taste of blackberries. I'm not saying all caregivers would do this, because I have observed some caregivers would go to the blackberry bush with the child and investigate and see if the blackberries are ripe and ready to eat, and join with them in the bounty of the hedge. So why do we demand obedience from our children? I think there is also an aspect of anybody who's listening to this and can see that part of requesting obedience may then feel a little bit guilty. And I know that if I think about the times where I needed my young people to follow me and do what I needed them to do, then I would also be accused of not respecting their rights to put themselves first. But I think back on, out of the 3 children I have, I've definitely got one who will say no. And he used to say no quite a lot when he was younger. He was quite clear about what he wanted to do. And then I considered, did I listen to his choices all the time? Actually, no, I didn't. I sent him to school, and he didn't want to go to school. And he was quite adamant that he didn't want to go to school, but I still made him go. Now, people appear to listen to their children when they don't want to go to school, for example, and they allow them to make choices around attending school and finding other options that might suit them better. Another aspect of why we won't say no, again linked to potentially how we were parented, is regarding expectation and what we believe the consequences might be should we displease someone. And this may be from someone sulking with us, ignoring us, abusing us verbally, or even physically if we didn't do the thing that the other person wanted. And if you go onto social media, you will note from the anonymous posts that there's still a lot of abuse that happens to individuals when people say no. So it's almost like there's an element of society that says it's not okay to say no. And if you say no, I'm going to ignore that word and I'm going to treat you badly because you said no. That's another point to have a look at. How to say no effectively. In a world that often values compliance over authenticity, the notion of personal freedom becomes not just a luxury, but a necessity for our well-being. Donald et al., Muris and Odkar. We find ourselves entangled in a web of obligations, constantly saying yes to requests that may not align with our true desires or priorities. Yet buried beneath the layers of societal expectations and internalized guilt lies the power to reclaim our autonomy. And this you will find if you explore positive psychology. The reasons why, or the things that we can do to build up to saying no. Why do we always say yes? Well, we covered this because it's about meeting people's expectations and fearing the consequences of when we say no, what might happen to us as a result of that disagreement, any anxieties or guilt that it might trigger. And we may choose the path of least resistance, which is possibly why some people choose to do neither, and they ignore you if that's possible. I had a conversation with Penny Dix around boundaries, and she was quite clear with me, you need to have defined boundaries, and this allows you to choose when to say no in the appropriate format. And you need to get out of that habit of saying yes. Those concessions where we give way to other people can chip away at our autonomy and self-respect. The other part that we need to consider is, do we feel that we can be assertive? Are we able to establish our boundaries with others? Say, for example, somebody offers you a piece of chocolate and you don't want any chocolate because you're on a diet, but your friend says, oh, go on then. And you don't want to upset them, so you may take a piece of the chocolate. Or could you put yourself first and the fact that you really want your diet to work and you haven't been eating sugar for some time now, so maybe saying no is in your best interests. And you could explain to your friend, it's going to be quite difficult for me to get back into the situation where I'm not eating sugar, especially chocolate, so I'd rather not take some at this time. Are they going to listen to you? And then you might want to think about, if the people around you are not respecting your healthy boundaries and their behaviours intolerant of who you need to be, are they really your friends? And that's another point that you might want to consider when you're establishing, this is me. Do you accept me? Do you accept me being on a diet and not wanting to eat the things that you want to eat? You do what you do and I'll do what I need to do. And as Debbie Walker says, swim in your own lane and let other people swim in their lane. The speed that they're going and the swimming stroke that they're using should have very little effect on what you're doing in your lane. And you should be able to move through the water with the grace that you choose to use. The other part that we need to consider is that learning to say no is also an act of self-compassion and self-care. It's about finding time for us. It may even be about finding time for the activities that we need to do for our own day and making space for our own needs. Learning to say no is an effective strategy in our self-awareness, and cultivating self-awareness is a key factor towards living a successful and healthy life. It's also something that we encourage students to do when they're exploring leadership skills and coaching skills. An important aspect, isn't it? So when you're looking at your self-awareness, how easy do you find it to say no? How easy do you find it to tell other people that you're not available? And that, thank you for asking me, and I appreciate you thinking of me, but the time is not right. This is something that we maybe could all practice and start practicing it today, one day at a time, 1 hour at a time. There is one suggestion, but instead of immediately agreeing to a request, you might want to say to the individual who asks you, can I take some time to consider your request or your invitation, and go away and assess your personal capacity to take on the extra commitment, thus trying to avoid impulsive commitments. And then you can ensure that the decisions you make align with your calendar and your other commitments and priorities. I would have thought that saying no would be easier when you receive an email or a message. And I'm going to explore some of the reasons why people might not respond or may not communicate on social media when they are asked to do things. Understand why people don't necessarily do things. So if we think about when we go to a restaurant or we're buying a new product, how many of us say, look at the reviews? I know I regularly will look at reviews to find out, is this product going to be the right product for me? Will it do what it says on the packet? I know that I use the reviews on Amazon. I will go and have a look and see, is it the right size? Will it carry out the job that I want it to do? So why don't people complete reviews? Why don't people give feedback? When I was on a course recently, some of you may know that I do complementary therapies, and I was on a sound practitioner course with Suara Sound Academy, and we were doing a number of case studies, and we were told, whatever you do, get the feedback there and then, because for some reason people will not complete feedback at a later date. So it was relatively easy. Most people gave feedback during the treatment time that they had allocated. So is this because people are busy with other commitments that they don't respond to your request for feedback or to give you a review? Now, I pondered this because after I had completed a range of treatments, I did actually send people a message, and I asked them to give me a review that I could use on my website. I didn't really want to extract pieces from their case study paperwork because I felt it was slightly different.
How many people do you think I received a review back from out of the 23 people that I provided case study therapies with? No one responded to my request for feedback or a review that I could put on my website. So initially I might think to myself, is that because the service or the therapy was not any good? Well, if I read the case study notes, that would indicate that the individuals enjoyed it. And the next day comments from them said, yes, they found that they slept well and the treatment was beneficial to them. So why not provide a review? Is it possible that I needed to make it easier for them? So something that I tried recently was to create a form on Google Forms. It's quite easy to create a form on Google Forms. And you can make it really easy by having drop-down boxes. You can offer multiple choice or a Likert scale. So last week, I decided to send a form out to ask for some feedback on what type of workshops would people like to experience, what time of day. I think I asked 3 questions. And that included any contact details should they wish me to contact them. So we didn't actually have to answer all of them. Again, I'm seeing 0 answers. And I put the form out on a number of different platforms. And I'm sat here, I'm honestly curious about why aren't people engaging with filling out the form or even commenting to say, Sarah, stop bothering us. Because I'm the type of person that I would like to know, if you're not going to do it, can you just say, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't like providing feedback. And I also don't like completing forms for other people. I don't want to be helpful. Is that true though? We're very good at making excuses for people, aren't we, for them not doing things. And sometimes it's part of maybe a people-pleasing persona where we might make excuses. We might say individuals are too anxious to complete the form. They don't want to put their name to the words, and they don't want you to put their name to the words on your website. So that's going to stop them from completing the form. And it's going to stop them from completing any feedback because they do not want that information to be attributed to them. They may see the request as being unimportant or it's not relevant to them. Why should they do it? They may go ahead and say, no, I'm not doing it. I've got better things to do with my time. But then there's also the aspect that they don't even think about it. It's not important to them, and so they choose, or maybe they don't even acknowledge the motion of choosing. They just don't do anything with it. There's also another aspect where people say that social fatigue might make it difficult to respond to a message, especially if at the time they read your post or your message and they're not up to a conversation. They don't feel like replying. They might be in their doom scrolling part of the day or the evening. And we have to admit that many of us do that. We scroll through our phone as part of a mechanism as we wind ourselves down, even when we know it's not particularly good for ourselves. What about digital burnout? Is that another reason why people are less likely to engage in conversations? Or is it text anxiety? I haven't actually come across that term before. What is text anxiety? Some people apparently experience anxiety or find it difficult to respond to text. Now, I sometimes wonder if my daughter has text anxiety because she always has a delayed response to my text messages. And she's certainly one of those individuals who's not ready to have a conversation with me. And it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's me or other people. She often leaves some time behind responding to the message. Now, another thing that came up within my research around why people don't respond is around the lack of visuals. People like to have a visual context and they might prefer you to add a picture. So how would you add a picture asking for feedback? Do you put emojis in there? Some people don't like emojis, so that would be a reason why they don't actually provide a response, because you used emojis, you didn't use the correct grammar. And I have heard individuals saying they weren't happy with the use of poor grammar, so it made them not respond because the message annoyed them. Sometimes it's said within platforms such as Quora that people are more likely to respond to requests if they feel empathy for the comment or the post. But if they don't feel any empathy, then the likelihood is that, again, they're not going to respond. Again, it's about what are you asking them to do? Because there are occasions when we do get some quite strange messages, don't we? And there's the element that, do we know the person who is asking us to respond to their message or their post? So what about if you know the person who's asking for help or guidance or feedback or a review? Why don't you do it then? Why don't you take the responsibility that somebody's asked for your help and made a note in your diary or set your alarm to respond to that? Why don't we do that? Why don't people do that? I know I sometimes have to go through my messages to make sure that I haven't missed anything, because occasionally there's a temptation to quickly run through your WhatsApp messages or your Messenger notes to see if anything has come through that's urgent. And you may quickly respond to the other messages that are there, even though you don't really have time to do that. So how do we go about allocating the time to attend to social media? Because it seems to be a platform that many people are using to communicate with each other. So should we be allocating time in our diary to deal with social media and those messages, like we would if we were reading the paper on a daily basis? How long should we be giving to communicating with other people on social media? And I think that would differ depending on who you are and how many people you communicate with on a daily basis. If we checked our screen time on our phones, it might indicate that we're probably talking to people on social media a lot more than we realise. And when you add in, you've got Instagram, you might be on TikTok, and you may be on X, as well as LinkedIn, Facebook, Messenger, and WhatsApp. So that's a significant number of social platforms to be talking to people on. And what about the amount of time you might be spending on person-to-person talking? Do we allocate time for that? Generally, we don't. But some of us are better at talking to other people than others. If I've got a task in hand, I find it very difficult to stop and just chat to people because I've got a driving need to get on with the job that I need to be doing. I'm currently near the end of marking some assignments, and it's a constant reminder to me that I need to get those done. I want to get them done. So I shouldn't be going on to social media and having a chat with anybody, should I, whilst I'm needing to get that job done? But I'm also conscious that my brain needs a break. And so what I tend to find myself doing is going on and maybe doing a little bit of the tired brain scrolling. So this is probably my excuse for not responding appropriately to some of the messages that may have been sent to me on social media. And what about emails? Do we always respond to emails that are sent to us? Certainly my experience in the last couple of weeks, I've sent out some requests to local businesses, and I'm still waiting for a response from them. And does this mean that email is not a good way of asking for assistance from businesses, and that we should be using the telephone and going back to talking to people and getting an immediate response? What are your thoughts? What is your preferred means of communicating with others? How do you like people to ask for help from you? How do you like to talk to people? Do you prefer to sit down over a cup of coffee and chat to each other? And do you do that on a regular basis? What do you find is the easiest way of sharing information? Do you go to groups and talk to each other? What is the normal pattern of your life when it comes to the exchange of information? What do you do most of? Have you looked to find out where you're spending all your time? Are you mainly chatting on social media? Or do you balance it all out? Is your life quite balanced? Do you go to groups and share information and talk to people and share how you're doing, where people listen to you? Are you doing those things, or are you mainly in a digital presence? Everybody's so different, aren't they? And it's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to work out why or what is going on when people don't do things. And I'm no closer to coming to any conclusion around why I've got forms that are unfilled, why people don't do the things that I think would be a reasonable thing to do based on what they like. But then I look at myself and think about the dichotomy of when I follow the rules and when I break the rules. And why is that? And I have not come up with a decent reason for any of it. So it genuinely leaves me curious, because I can't find an answer. Because we're all individual and we all have so many different facets about the reason behind why we make the decisions we do each day. And it might change from one day to the next on how we may feel, on how we respond, and those different elements are partly what makes us so interesting as human beings.
Boundaries are like clouds. Sometimes you look at a cloud and there are no clear edges to it. And that, if you investigate, indicates that there's no clear direction on what weather is coming towards us. But when the edge of a cloud is crisp, it gives us a signal. It tells us it is the edge of the weather changing. And maybe if we can establish clear boundaries that people can see and they know when they're crossing them, it might make communication a little bit easier. Let's have a look at our own boundaries. Are we like the wispy clouds that are high, holding elements of ice in the sky, but unreachable and potentially uncrossable? Or are we offering boundaries that have got clear edges that everyone can see, and they know when they're crossing them, and they know when to sit back? But we also need to be mindful that we don't set such strict boundaries that they're like a no entry sign. There's quite a lot there to work through when we're considering setting our boundaries. If you have any comments, please do make a comment here on the podcast site, or you can contact me at info@thedandelionmoon.co.uk. I look forward to hearing from you.